"No, please, don't leave us here." The cry echoed, muffled by the merciless howl of the wind and the torrential rain that lashed her aged face. She clung to her 3 small children, their hearts beating in unison with despair. Abandoned, penniless, at the mercy of the medieval storm's fury, her already exhausted feet stumbled on the muddy path, but an imposing silhouette emerged amidst the lightning. A forgotten monastery, its walls crumbling like a spectre of the past. Would it be a shelter, or merely the harbinger of an even darker fate? Little did she know that, behind those ancient stones, a dormant secret awaited revelation. A secret that would forever change the course of their lives. Ilara, hunched against the fury of the elements, pressed her children close, feeling the tremor of their small hearts. Lyra, 7 years old, had eyes brimming with apprehension. Teo, 5, sobbed softly, and little Maya, 3, slept, exhausted, in her arms. The monastery, once a beacon of faith, seemed like a sleeping giant, its grey stones swallowing the meager light. The promise of shelter, fragile as it was, propelled her aching feet. Each step was a battle against the wind and the mud that clung to her torn garments. With a final effort, Ilara pushed the wooden gate, which groaned in protest, revealing an inner courtyard covered in weeds and rubble. The silence within, heavy and imbued with centuries of abandonment, was almost as frightening as the storm. The smell of mold and damp earth filled her nostrils, but above all, there was a sense of protection. The cracked walls offered a shield against the biting wind and the relentless rain. "We're safe, my loves," Ilara whispered, more to herself than to the children, whose frightened little eyes scanned their surroundings. Lyra, with courage forged in necessity, squeezed her mother's hand. Teo, still trembling, hid his face in the folds of Ilara's cloak. Little Maya, awakened, blinked in confusion and snuggled back in. Ilara sought a less exposed corner. The cloister, with its crumbling arches, seemed the most viable option. The cold stone slabs were dry beneath the partially intact roof. She sat, leaning against a column, and pulled her children close, trying to warm them with the meager heat of their exhausted bodies. Hunger, a constant companion, gnawed at everyone's stomachs. But the relief of being out of the storm was a temporary balm. As her children huddled, Ilara felt a pang of hope mixed with exhaustion. It was a place, after all, a roof, but hope was fragile, a tenuous thread. What would they do tomorrow? Where would they find food? The sight of the ruined monastery mirrored her own shattered life. Silent tears streamed down her wrinkled face, mingling with the raindrops that stubbornly clung to her hair. With a heavy sigh, she tried to stand to explore, searching for a forgotten blanket or a piece of bread. Her feet, numb and swollen, barely supported her. In an awkward movement, as she tried to lean on an ivy-covered wall, her foot slipped on a loose stone. She lost her balance and fell, not onto the ground, but into an unexpected void. A stone panel, camouflaged by dirt and vegetation, had given way under her weight. A muffled cry escaped her lips, but she managed to cling to the edge. Her children, frightened, cried out. "Mama!" Lyra exclaimed, rushing to help her. Ilara, her heart pounding, looked down. The darkness was deep, but a current of cool air rose, carrying a scent of ancient earth, metallic and dusty. It wasn't an ordinary hole. It was a passage, a secret opening beneath the wall. Her eyes, accustomed to the gloom, began to discern irregular steps descending into the unknown. Fear and childlike curiosity propelled her. What could be hidden there, in the bowels of the forgotten monastery? Would it be another danger, or the answer to her desperate prayers? The spark of hope, once fragile, now crackled with renewed intensity. Ilara, her calloused hands gripping the rough edge of the opening, felt her entire body tremble, not just from the cold, but from the vertigo of that unexpected abyss. Lyra, wide-eyed, tugged at her mother's cloak, her face pale with fright. Teo whimpered, and Maya, in Ilara's lap, pressed herself against her, sensing the tension in the air. The darkness below seemed to swallow the faint light from the courtyard, but the rising current of air carried no scent of danger, but rather of something ancient, forgotten, almost sacred, an inner voice, the same one that had urged her forward even when all seemed lost, whispered that the answer might lie there. "It's all right, my loves," Ilara murmured, her voice thick with emotion and adrenaline. She carefully turned, sitting on the edge of the opening and swinging her legs inside, testing the solidity of the uneven steps. "We'll go down slowly. Mama will go first." Lyra, though frightened, nodded, trusting her mother. Teo, with a trembling sigh, reached out his small hand to Ilara, seeking reassurance. Little Maya, still sleepy, just snuggled closer. The descent was slow and laborious, each stone step, eroded by time and covered by a thin layer of dust, demanded caution. Ilara descended backward, holding Maya with one hand and extending the other to Teo, while Lyra followed closely, her eyes fixed on her mother's feet. The air grew denser, colder, and the silence was almost palpable, broken only by Ilara's whispers and the soft shuffle of their feet. "Almost there, my angels," she repeated, more to herself than to them, trying to calm her own heart that beat like a drum. After what seemed an eternity, her feet touched a flatter ground. Ilara lit the improvised torch she had found in the courtyard, a piece of dry wood. The flickering light revealed a small, damp, and dusty underground chamber with rough stone walls. In the center, something stood out, a dark, wooden chest, adorned with rusted iron fittings and a massive padlock. It was not a coffin, nor a trap. It was a strongbox. Ilara's eyes widened. Her children, curious, approached, forgetting their fear for a moment. She knelt before the chest, her hands trembling as she touched the cold, ancient wood. The dust crumbled under her fingers, revealing almost faded carvings. With an effort, she tried to open the padlock, but it was sealed by time. However, beside the chest there was a small metal object, an ancient key, almost hidden beneath a pile of rubble. Her fingers, guided by a sudden intuition, reached for it. With her heart in her throat, Ilara inserted the key into the lock. A soft click echoed in the silence of the chamber, and the padlock sprang open. She hesitated for a moment, the fear of disappointment battling against the hope that now burned in her chest. With a deep sigh, she lifted the heavy lid. The torchlight danced over the contents, revealing a golden, shimmering glow. Gold coins, piles of them, some scattered, others in small, disintegrated leather pouches. Jewels, rings, necklaces, and brooches, encrusted with stones that reflected the light in 1,000 colors. The air was filled with the scent of ancient wealth, of secrets guarded for centuries. Ilara brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes brimming with disbelief. Lyra and Teo gasped in astonishment, and even little Maya reached out her small hand for the sparkle. It wasn't a dream. It was real. That treasure, forgotten in the bowels of the monastery, was the answer to her most desperate prayers. The promise of a future, of security, of a life she had never dared to dream of, lay there, gleaming before her eyes. The exhaustion and despair of hours ago were swept away by an overwhelming wave of gratitude and hope. They were saved. Ilara, her hand still resting on the gleaming treasure, felt a wave of warmth spread through her chest, warming her in a way that the most intense fire could not. It wasn't just the gleam of gold, but the promise of life it represented. Her eyes, once clouded with tears of despair, now shone with a hope so intense it seemed to illuminate the underground chamber. Lyra, her childlike curiosity overcoming her fear, touched one of the coins with her fingertip, her eyes wide. "Mama, is it real?" she whispered, her voice full of sweet astonishment. Teo, more cautious, merely watched, but a faint smile began to blossom on his dirty face. Maya, in Ilara's lap, stretched out her small hand to grasp a dangling necklace, its stones catching the flickering torchlight. "Yes, my loves," Ilara replied, her voice thick with emotion. She picked up a gold coin, feeling its cold, solid weight in her palm. It was a piece of sun, a piece of the future. It's very real, and it's for us. Gratitude flooded her, mingling with the exhaustion that still weighed on her shoulders. How was it possible that at the lowest point of her life, divine providence had placed such a grand miracle in her path? She hugged her children tightly, kissing the tops of their heads. The smell of mold and damp earth was still there, but now it seemed less oppressive, almost a perfume of rebirth. The first concern, after the initial shock, was safety. The treasure was vast, but also an immense responsibility. Ilara closed the chest lid, the click of the padlock sounding like a seal of protection. They needed to leave, but the storm outside still raged, and the night was deep. The monastery, with its cracked walls, was still their only refuge. "Let's go up, my little ones," she said, her voice now firmer. "We need to find a drier, safer place to spend the night." The ascent was easier, propelled by renewed energy. Back in the cloister, the wind still whistled through the broken arches, but the rain had lessened to a steady drizzle. Ilara found a more sheltered corner, where a part of the roof was still intact and the stone floor was less damp. Carefully, she spread out the thickest cloak they possessed, creating a small, improvised bed for the children. Lyra and Teo snuggled beside each other, and Maya, lulled by exhaustion and the feeling of safety, quickly fell asleep in her mother's arms. Ilara sat, leaning her back against the cold wall, but her heart was warm. She watched the serene faces of her sleeping children, their soft breathing a balm for her soul. Hunger was still a pang, but the urgency had diminished, replaced by the certainty that tomorrow would bring bread and much more. She thought of the journey that had brought them there, the pain of abandonment, the fear of hunger, the biting cold. Each step had been a test, and now she felt she had passed. With a calmer mind, Ilara began to plan. What would they do with the gold? They couldn't simply appear with it anywhere. They would need wisdom, caution. That treasure was not just wealth. It was a tool to rebuild, to give her children the life they deserved, a life of dignity and security. She imagined a small house, perhaps a piece of land where they could plant, a place where the children's laughter would not be stifled by fear. The night advanced, and weariness finally began to overcome Ilara. Her eyes were heavy, but she resisted sleep, feeling the need to watch over, to protect her newfound miracle. She caressed Maya's hair, feeling its softness under her fingers. That monastery, which seemed like an end, had transformed into the beginning of everything. The darkness outside was still vast, but within her heart, an inextinguishable light had ignited, promising a new dawn. Ilara closed her eyes, allowing herself to dream of a future that, just hours before, had seemed impossible. Hope, once a tenuous thread, was now a robust fabric, ready to envelop her beloved family in an embrace of security and lasting love. The first ray of timid, pale sunlight crept through the broken arches of the monastery, painting the stone floor with a soft gold. Ilara awoke with a start, her mind still cradled by dreams of a prosperous future. For an instant, she thought it had been merely an illusion, another cruel trick of hunger and despair. But then, her eyes fell upon the sleeping faces of Lyra, Teo, and Maya, and the memory of the strongbox, of the gleaming gold, flooded her with an overwhelming certainty. It was not a dream. It was reality, as palpable as the cold stone beneath her back. She rose carefully, feeling her aching muscles and the stiffness of a night poorly slept. The storm had passed, leaving behind fresh air and the damp scent of earth. The monastery's silence was different now, no longer oppressive, but filled with the promise of a new beginning. Ilara walked to the secret opening, her heart pounding. She descended the steps again, lighting the improvised torch. There it was, the chest, a silent guardian of her new hope. She opened the lid, and the gold glittered, confirming the miracle. A wave of emotions hit her. Deep gratitude, a relief that made her weep silently, but also a pang of anxiety. How to protect that treasure? How to use it wisely, without attracting unwanted attention? The responsibility was immense, almost as heavy as the gold itself. She could not fail. Not after all they had been through. Her children deserved more than the life of privation she had offered them until then. Back in the cloister, the children began to stir. Lyra rubbed her eyes, and Teo yawned, stretching his thin arms. Maya, with the innocence of her 3 years, smiled at her mother. "Mama, I'm hungry," Lyra said, her voice still hoarse with sleep. Those words, once a dagger in Ilara's heart, now carried a different weight. "We will have food, my love. Plenty of food," she promised, her voice thick with emotion. The first step was to get food. Ilara knew they couldn't simply appear in a village with gold coins. Caution was paramount. She needed a plan. With trembling hands, she took some silver and copper coins that were also in the chest, more discreet, and hid them in a small cloth bag. The gold would remain hidden, safe, until they could find a more suitable place for it. "Let's walk a bit, my darlings," Ilara announced, trying to sound as normal as possible. "We'll look for a nearby village." The children's eyes filled with renewed hope. The idea of food and a safe place to stay was a balm for their little hearts. Ilara helped them up, adjusting their clothes and embracing them with overflowing affection. Leaving the monastery was an act of faith. The sun was already higher, and the world outside seemed to have washed itself clean of the storm. The air was fresh and clean. Ilara looked back at the silent ruins that had been her refuge and her turning point. A nod, a silent promise that one day she would return, perhaps to honor the place that had given them a second chance. They walked along the muddy trail, but this time, with each step, Ilara felt the ground firmer beneath her feet. Hunger still gnawed, but anguish had been replaced by an iron determination. She needed to be strong, not just for herself, but for her children. The image of a better life, of dignity and security, was the beacon that guided her. As they advanced, Ilara thought about how cruel fate had been, but also incredibly generous. The abandonment, the storm, the despair, everything had culminated in that miracle. It was proof that even in the depths of darkness, light could emerge from where it was least expected. She squeezed Lyra's hand, feeling the small, warm palm. The connection between them, strengthened by adversity, was the true treasure. The journey had barely begun, but Ilara knew that, with love and courage, they would rebuild their lives brick by brick, dream by dream. The past was left behind, and the future, though uncertain, shone with the promise of a new dawn. The trail, which had once seemed endless under the rain and despair, now revealed itself as a promising path under the morning sun. Ilara's feet, though still aching, moved with a lightness that surprised her. Lyra and Teo, with renewed energy from the promise of food, ran a little ahead, pointing at birds in the sky or colorful flowers by the roadside. Maya, nestled in her mother's lap, observed the world with curious eyes, oblivious to the depth of the change that enveloped them. Ilara watched her children, a tender smile playing on her wrinkled lips. It was a smile she hadn't felt in a long time, a smile of genuine hope, not just resignation. After a few hours of walking, the distant sound of voices and a dog's bark reached their ears. Soon, smoke from chimneys rose on the horizon, outlining a village. Ilara's heart leaped, fear and relief mingled. How would they be received? Their torn clothes and dirty faces betrayed the misery from which they came. She clutched the small cloth bag with the silver and copper coins, feeling the weight of the decision she would have to make. They couldn't appear rich, but they also couldn't appear as beggars. Dignity, even in poverty, was something she had always cherished. "Slowly, my angels," she called, her voice soft, reaching Lyra and Teo. "Let's enter calmly." The little ones obeyed, sensing the seriousness in their mother's tone. As they approached, the first wooden houses with thatched roofs appeared, simple but welcoming. The smell of fresh bread and wood smoke filled the air, making Ilara's stomach rumble in protest. The children, wide-eyed, absorbed every detail. A man tilling the earth, women hanging clothes, children playing in the dirt street. It was a world of life, so different from the sepulchral silence of the monastery. Ilara spotted a small tavern, its wooden door ajar and the inviting aroma of stew wafting out. It was the perfect place to start. She smoothed her clothes as best she could and tidied Lyra's and Teo's hair. "Remember, my loves, we are travelers. We lost our way in the storm, but we are well now," she instructed, with a look that pleaded for understanding and discretion. The children, though small, seemed to understand the importance of the moment, nodding their heads. With Maya still asleep in her arms, Ilara entered the tavern. The place was rustic, with heavy wooden tables and a counter where a corpulent man cleaned tankards. Some villagers chatted animatedly. All eyes turned to them. Ilara felt a blush rise to her face, but she lifted her chin, seeking strength. "Good morning," she said, her voice a little hoarse, but firm. "Forgive our intrusion. My family and I were caught in the storm and are hungry. Is there anything we can eat?" The tavern keeper, a man with a thick beard and kind eyes, assessed them for a moment. His expression softened. "Poor souls. Come in, sit down. I have good beef stew and fresh bread. Don't worry about payment for now. I see you're in need." Ilara felt a lump in her throat. The kindness of that stranger was a balm for her wounded soul. "I thank you for your generosity, sir, but we have means to pay," she replied, carefully taking one of the silver coins from the bag. The gesture, discreet but firm, showed that they were not beggars, just travelers in distress. The tavern keeper nodded, a glint of respect in his eyes. "As you wish, madam. Sit at that table. I'll bring the food." Ilara led her children to a quiet corner. Lyra and Teo sat down, their eyes fixed on the kitchen, from where the delicious smell emanated. Little Maya awoke, and upon seeing the surroundings, a wide smile spread across her face. Ilara knew that this was just the first step, but it was a firm step towards rebuilding their lives. That village, with its simplicity and human warmth, seemed like a safe harbor, a place where the seed of hope could finally blossom. She held Lyra's hand, feeling the warmth of the connection that bound them, and knew that together they would face whatever came. The aroma of the stew was a promise fulfilled. The tavern keeper, with the welcoming smile, placed steaming bowls and warm, rustic bread on the table. Lyra and Teo, their eyes shining, didn't wait for permission. They plunged their spoons into the tender meat and vegetables, and the silence that followed was the sweetest sound Ilara had ever heard. Maya, still sleepy, accepted the spoon her mother offered her, and her small face lit up with the taste. Ilara, in turn, ate slowly, savoring each mouthful. It wasn't just food, it was the first meal without the crushing weight of despair in a long time. A solitary tear streamed down her face, a mixture of relief and gratitude. She looked at her children, their faces smeared with stew, but their eyes full of simple, pure joy. That was her true treasure. As they ate, Ilara observed the tavern's activity. Villagers conversed in low voices, the clinking of tankards and the crackling of the fireplace, creating an atmosphere of warmth and security. She felt a pang of hope, but also the necessary caution. She needed to be discreet. After the meal, when the bowls were empty and smiles satisfied, Ilara called the tavern keeper. "Sir, the food was delicious. We thank you immensely." She extended her hand, holding the silver coin she had taken from the bag. The tavern keeper took the coin, turning it between his fingers. His eyes, once merely kind, now showed a glint of curiosity. "This is an old coin, madam. I don't see many like it around here." He examined it more closely, and Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. Would this be the moment her discretion failed? Before she could reply, a soft, melodious voice from a nearby table spoke up. "Forgive my intrusion, madam, but I overheard the tavern keeper. May I see the coin?" Ilara turned to find a woman with well-kept grey hair, a silk scarf tied around her head, and piercing yet kind eyes. She wore simple but well-made clothes, and a silver brooch adorned her chest. The woman approached, and the tavern keeper, with a nod, handed her the coin. The stranger held it with reverence, her slender fingers tracing the almost faded carvings. "This is a rare piece," she said, raising her gaze to Ilara. "A coin of the Order of the Guardians of Light, extinct for centuries. There's a ruined monastery a few days' walk from here, said to have been their last refuge." Ilara felt her heart race. The woman knew, not about the treasure, but about the origin of one of the coins. The discretion she so valued was at risk, but the woman's voice carried no malice, only a tone of knowledge. Lyra and Teo, sensing the tension, huddled a little. Maya, oblivious, played with a piece of bread. "Yes, madam," Ilara replied, her voice a little shaky. "We found this coin on our travels. We didn't know its history." The woman smiled, a warm smile that somewhat calmed Ilara's nerves. "Don't worry, my dear. I am no treasure hunter. My name is Isolde. I am a healer and also a scholar of ancient histories. I recognize the symbol. The Order was known for its wisdom and for guarding secrets. If you have more of these coins, they may hold a value beyond gold." Isolde paused, her eyes fixed on Ilara's. "But they can also attract the wrong kind of attention, if not used wisely. What brought you to this village, with your children?" Isolde's question, though gentle, was direct, and Ilara felt she was at a turning point. This woman was not a threat, but a revelation. Ilara could no longer hide the truth of her situation, nor the origin of her new fortune, at least not entirely. That unexpected encounter with a stranger who seemed to know more than one could imagine forced Ilara to rethink her plans. The simple idea of buying a house and living in peace now seemed naive. The treasure had a story, and that story was beginning to unfold in ways Ilara had never imagined. She needed wisdom, and perhaps this woman could offer it. Ilara took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on Isolde's. The healer seemed to read her soul. The honesty in her gaze was palpable. Loneliness weighed more heavily than the fear of opening up. "My lady," Ilara began, her voice firm, "what brought us here was despair. I was abandoned with my children, with nothing, in the midst of a storm. We sought refuge." Ilara's tear-filled eyes relived the pain. Lyra and Teo pressed against her. Maya yawned. "We reached the monastery. It seemed like the end, but there we found something that gave us a new chance." Isolde listened attentively, her eyes showing compassion. She gently touched Ilara's shoulder. "I understand, my dear. The monastery of the Order of the Guardians of Light was a place of refuge and knowledge. They protected ancient treasures and wisdom. This coin is a symbol of their mission, the light they sought to preserve." The tavern keeper, sensing the seriousness, cleared his throat. "Excuse me, Lady Isolde, Lady Ilara. I must return to my work." He handed the coin to Isolde and moved away. "Thank you, sir," Ilara murmured, turning to Isolde. "We knew nothing of this. For us, it was just a miracle, a way to survive." She hesitated, thinking of the gold. "We found some of these coins and other things, enough to give us a new beginning if we know how to use it wisely." Isolde nodded. "Wisdom is the key, Ilara. A treasure can be a blessing or a burden. The Order believed that true wealth lay in what one could do: help the needy, build communities, preserve knowledge. They were altruistic. She took Ilara's hand, her touch warm. You and your children were guided for a reason. It wasn't just luck. There is a greater purpose, but be cautious. Not everyone views wealth kindly. Your children are your greatest treasure. The gold is merely a means to protect them and build a future. Ilara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Isolde's words were a balm. I just want to give them a dignified life, Lady Isolde. A home, food, security, everything I lost. And you will, my dear, Isolde promised. But perhaps your journey won't end with just a home. There is something more you are destined to do. The Order's knowledge hasn't vanished. There are fragments, clues, scattered, and you, by finding the treasure, have become part of that story. Ilara looked at her children, then at Isolde. A new layer of complexity unfolded, but also a sense of direction. What should I do then? Ilara asked, her voice low, but filled with new determination. Isolde smiled. First, rest. Then come find me. My house is the last on the right, at the edge of the village, near the stream. I have more to share about the Order, and how you can protect your treasure and perhaps discover your true purpose. Ilara felt relief and gratitude. That village, a safe harbor, was revealing itself as a new starting point, and Isolde, an unexpected guide. Ilara felt Isolde's invitation like an invisible embrace, a promise that she was no longer alone. The healer seemed to emanate an ancestral wisdom, and Ilara, her heart still in turmoil, knew she had to accept. That village, which seemed like a temporary refuge, was revealing itself as a portal to a greater destiny. She nodded, her eyes brimming with gratitude. Yes, Lady Isolde, I thank you immensely. My children need to rest, but I will seek you out as soon as I can. Isolde smiled, a gesture that calmed Ilara's soul. There's no rush, my dear. Take care of your little ones. Knowledge can wait, but a child's comfort cannot. She bid farewell with a gentle nod and returned to her table. Ilara, feeling the curious glances of the villagers, led Lyra, Teo, and Maya out of the tavern. The afternoon sun was already lower, painting the sky with orange hues. Finding a place to spend the night was the priority. Ilara spotted a small inn across the street, more modest, but promising a safe roof. With the remaining silver coins, she secured a simple room with 3 straw beds and a window overlooking a small garden. The children, exhausted, fell onto the beds almost immediately, falling asleep amidst murmurs of contentment. Ilara watched them, her heart tight with love and a new hope. After ensuring everyone was safe, Ilara washed her face and hands in a basin of cold water. Isolde's image and her words resonated in her mind. There is a greater purpose. What could it be? The treasure, which once represented only survival, now gained an almost mystical dimension. She needed to understand. As the stars began to dot the sky, Ilara kissed each child's forehead and left the room, closing the door carefully. The night air was fresh and carried the scent of wood smoke and wet earth. She followed Isolde's instructions, walking down the village's main street. The houses, lit by lanterns, seemed welcoming and full of life. The last house on the right, near the stream, was small and cozy, with dried herbs hanging on the porch. A light flickered in its window. Ilara hesitated for an instant, feeling a mix of apprehension and excitement. She knocked softly on the wooden door. In a few seconds, Isolde opened it, her face illuminated by a warm smile. "Come in, Ilara. I was expecting you." The healer led her into a room filled with books, jars of herbs, and a crackling fire in the hearth. The scent of chamomile and sage tea filled the air. "Sit down, my dear," Isolde said, pointing to a cushioned wooden chair. She served 2 steaming cups of tea. "You are safe here. Now, we can talk." Ilara held the cup, feeling the warmth in her hands. "Lady Isolde, your words in the tavern." They touched me deeply. What do you know about the Order of the Guardians of Light? Isolde took a sip of tea, her eyes fixed on the flames. The Order was a brotherhood of sages and healers, dedicated to preserving knowledge and aiding the needy. They believed that true wealth lay not in gold, but in the ability to transform lives, to ignite the light of hope where there was darkness. The monastery where you found the treasure was one of their last strongholds, a sanctuary of wisdom and compassion. But why was the treasure abandoned? Ilara asked, her voice low. They were persecuted by those who feared their power and influence, Isolde explained with a sigh. Before they were dispersed, they hid their most precious possessions, not just the gold, but also scrolls, maps, and artifacts, in the hope that one day someone worthy would find them, someone who could continue their mission. Ilara felt a shiver. Are you saying that? I was chosen. Isolde smiled. Destiny has its ways, Ilara. You didn't find the treasure by chance. The Order believed that compassion and resilience were the greatest virtues. You, with your love for your children and your unwavering strength, embody these values. The gold is just the beginning. The true treasure is the opportunity to rebuild not just your life, but perhaps something much greater. There is a legacy to be honored, Ilara, a community to be nurtured, knowledge to be rediscovered. The monastery was not an end, but a new beginning for you and for the Order. Isolde paused, her eyes shining with a gentle intensity. You have the power to ignite that light again. Ilara looked at her hands, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also a spark of purpose that went beyond her own family. Ilara felt the weight of Isolde's words, not as a burden, but as a revelation. The idea that her journey, marked by so much pain and despair, could have a greater purpose, an echo of an ancient brotherhood, was both frightening and deeply moving. She looked at the dancing flames in the fireplace, seeking in the embers the clarity that was missing from her mind. A legacy to be honored, a community to be nurtured, she repeated, her voice almost a whisper. But how, Lady Isolde? I am just a widow with 3 children to protect. My only desire was to find a safe home for them. Isolde, with a look of deep understanding, placed her hand over Ilara's. And that desire is the cornerstone of everything, my dear. The Order did not seek personal power or glory. They sought collective well-being, the protection of the most vulnerable, the dissemination of knowledge and healing. The gold you found is not just to buy a house. It is a tool, a means to ignite the light they so cherished. Ilara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of fear and a strange excitement. But what does that mean in practice? How can I, a simple woman, honor such a grand legacy? It means looking around you, Ilara, Isolde replied, her eyes shining. This village, like many others, has its needs. Children without education, sick without treatment, families struggling to survive. The Order always acted where the darkness of ignorance and misery spread. They built schools, hospitals, offered support to orphans and the elderly. It's not about great deeds of war, but about small acts of kindness that together transform lives. Ilara imagined Lyra, Teo, and Maya in a world where they could learn, where hunger was not a constant threat. The vision was powerful. I never thought of something like this, she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. My life was always about surviving day after day, and then about protecting my children. And you did so with admirable strength, Isolde praised, squeezing her hand. But now you have the opportunity to do more. The treasure is the catalyst. Imagine a school for the village children where they can learn to read and write. Imagine a small healing center where the sick can receive care. Imagine a community greenhouse where everyone can grow food. Ilara's eyes widened. The images Isolde painted were vivid and inspiring. It wasn't just about her and her children, it was about reaching out, about creating a future for everyone. Altruism, which once seemed a distant luxury, now presented itself as a tangible path. But what if I'm not capable? Ilara asked, insecurity still manifesting. What if I fail? What if I attract the wrong kind of attention, as you mentioned? Isolde smiled. You won't be alone, Ilara. I will be here to guide you. And the Order believed that true strength lies in unity. There are good people in this village, people who yearn for a better future. You will need wisdom to choose your allies and discretion to protect the treasure and your children. But the courage that brought you here, the same courage that made you fight for your little ones, is the same that will guide you in this new purpose. Ilara felt a wave of emotion. Isolde's words were a balm for her soul, an invitation to something grand. She could feel the spark of a greater purpose igniting within her, transforming fear into determination. It wouldn't be easy, she knew, but the idea of building something lasting, something that would benefit everyone, was irresistible. So, what should I do first? Ilara asked. Her voice now firm, her eyes fixed on Isolde's, full of a new light. The warmth of the teacup in her hands seemed to mirror the warmth spreading through her heart. She was no longer just an abandoned widow. She was the guardian of hope, the bearer of a legacy. The future, once uncertain, now unfolded with a clear and inspiring purpose. Ilara felt a shiver of energy run through her body, mingling with gratitude and apprehension. What should I do first then, Lady Isolde? She asked, her voice now firm, her eyes fixed on the healers full of a new light. Isolde smiled, a glint of approval in her gaze. Patience is a virtue, Ilara. A future isn't built in a single day. First, observe. Walk through the village with attentive eyes. See the children playing in the streets. The mothers working, the elderly. Where is the light most needed? Ilara nodded, absorbing the words. Observing and connecting with real needs seemed a tangible, less daunting step. The next morning, after a peaceful sleep at the inn, Ilara awoke with new determination. Lyra, Teo, and Maya were still asleep, their faces serene. Ilara kissed their foreheads, feeling the familiar wave of love that was her compass. She dressed in her simplest clothes and left, leaving the children in the care of the innkeeper, a kind woman. The sun bathed the village, revealing a tapestry of life. Children ran barefoot, laughing, women hung clothes, men worked in the gardens. Ilara walked slowly, her eyes now trained to see beyond. She noticed the lack of a suitable place for children to learn, the absence of a permanent healer, the simple houses. Her heart tightened, not from despair, but from a renewed purpose. The image of a school, as Isolde had suggested, began to take shape in her mind. She saw children, perhaps Lyra's and Teo's age, trying to draw in the dirt with sticks, their parents too busy to teach them. The need was clear, but doubt whispered, "Me, build a school? I, who barely knew how to read and write, who had fled from misery." Insecurity was an old acquaintance, but now it came accompanied by Isolde's voice, the image of the monastery, and the promise of a future for her children. She remembered the strength that had driven her to seek refuge and protect the treasure. In the afternoon, with a lighter heart and a mind full of observations, Ilara returned to Isolde's house. The healer awaited her with a welcoming smile and tea. "What did your eyes see, Ilara?" Isolde asked, inviting her to sit. Ilara described her impressions, the lack of education for children, the need for care. "I think a school would be a good start, Lady Isolde," she said, her voice gaining confidence. "There are so many children who could benefit." Isolde nodded, her eyes shining. "Excellent choice, Ilara. Education is the foundation, but we cannot simply build. We need the community, a location, materials, and most importantly, a teacher." Ilara felt the weight of the task, but her determination was greater. "Where could we start?" Ilara asked eagerly. Isolde took an ancient scroll and a piece of charcoal. There's an abandoned barn at the edge of the village. It could be renovated. But for that, we'll need hands. And for hands, we need hearts. You'll need to talk to the parents, Ilara. Explain your vision. Show them the hope that education can bring. Ilara felt a knot in her stomach. Talking to strangers, convincing people. An immense social and emotional challenge for someone who had always lived on the fringes. But thinking of Lyra's and Teo's curious eyes, of the thirst for knowledge she saw in them, courage ignited. I will, Ilara promised, her gaze fixed on the scroll. For my children, and for all the children of this village. Isolde smiled, a smile that conveyed confidence. That is the true essence of the order, Ilara. Not the gold, but the spirit of service. We will begin tomorrow with the first conversations. You will not be alone. The light you ignited in the monastery will now shine for everyone. Ilara felt a comforting warmth. The path would be long, but for the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was building, sowing a better future not only for her family, but for the entire community. The next morning, the sun had barely risen when Ilara got up, her heart beating with a mixture of anxiety and purpose. Lyra, Teo, and Maya were still fast asleep, oblivious to the magnitude of the day that was beginning. Ilara kissed each of their foreheads, feeling the strength that emanated from her love for them. She dressed in her best simple clothes, the same ones she had worn to meet Isolde, and took a deep breath. The innkeeper, a kind-faced woman, had promised to look after the children. Ilara stepped out into the village streets, which were beginning to awaken. The smell of fresh bread and wood smoke hung in the air. Her steps were hesitant, but the image of the abandoned barn, the future site of the school, gave her courage. She knew that the task of convincing the parents would be arduous. Many lived in poverty, distrustful of strangers and skeptical of promises. Her first approach was to a woman hanging clothes, her face marked by fatigue, with two small boys playing nearby. Ilara approached, a gentle smile on her lips. "Good morning, madam. My name is Ilara. I'm new to the village." The woman named Marta looked up, an expression of caution. "Good morning. Can I help you with something?" "Actually, I'd like to talk about something I believe could benefit your children, and all the children here," Ilara began, her voice a little shaky. "I thought of organizing a school so they could learn to read and write, to count." Marta let out a bitter laugh. "A school? Madam, we barely have enough to eat. My children need to work, not dream of books. Who would pay for it, and who would teach?" She shook her head, turning back to her clothes. "It's a beautiful idea, but impossible." Ilara's heart sank. It was exactly what she feared. The rejection was painful, but she remembered Isolde's words. The Order believed that true strength lies in unity. She could not give up. Ilara spent the morning talking to other families. Some listened politely, but most expressed the same skepticism as Marta. "We don't have time. We don't have money. It's always been this way." With each no, Ilara's insecurity grew, but the vision of Lyra and Teo with books in their hands, of Maya learning to read, propelled her forward. She described the barn, the possibility of a different future, but the words seemed to get lost in the air. At noon, exhausted and disheartened, Ilara found Isolde at her house. The healer received her with an understanding look. "I see the journey was challenging. They don't believe Lady Isolde," Ilara confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "They think it's an impossible dream. They don't see the hope." Isolde served her an herbal tea. "Hope, Ilara, needs to be sown with patience, and sometimes it needs a catalyst. People need to see your determination, feel your truth. It's not enough to speak. You must show your heart." Ilara took a sip of the warm tea, feeling it calm her nerves. But how? I am a stranger here. I have nothing but a promise." "You have more than that," Isolde replied, her eyes fixed on Ilara's. "You have a mother's courage, the vision of a future, and the means to start it. Gold, Ilara, is just metal. True wealth is trust. Call them, all the parents, in the center of the village at dusk, and then speak from the heart. Show them what the order truly represented, the light that ignites for everyone." The idea of speaking to everyone, of exposing herself, made Ilara's stomach churn. But determination overcame fear. She spent the afternoon inviting families, some with more success than others. At dusk, a small crowd gathered in the central square, curious, distrustful, some hopeful faces. Ilara climbed onto a small wooden box, her heart pounding. Her eyes swept over the crowd, searching for a sign of acceptance. She saw Marta with her children and other parents who had rejected her. "My friends," Ilara began, her voice, to her surprise, sounding clear and firm. "I know I am a stranger. I arrived in this village with my 3 children, fleeing despair, seeking refuge. And here I found more than refuge. I found hope." She paused, her eyes welling up. "I know what hunger is, what cold is, what the fear of not having a future for our children is. I saw your children playing in the streets with the same thirst for knowledge I see in mine. And I ask myself, don't they deserve more than this?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Ilara continued, emotion overflowing in her words. "I am not here to ask. I am here to offer the chance to build a school where your children can learn to read, to write, to dream, where they can have a future that perhaps we did not have. I have the means to begin. I have the will, but I need you. I need your hands, your hearts, your belief." She pointed to the abandoned barn, visible in the distance. That barn can be more than just a shelter. It can be the cradle of a new future for our children. It won't be easy. There will be hard work. But together, we can ignite a light that will never again be extinguished in this village. Marta's eyes, once skeptical, now shone with a tear. Other parents began to murmur, not with distrust, but with a contained enthusiasm. An elderly man whom Ilara had seen in the tavern stepped forward. "If you have the means and the will, Ilara, we have the hands. Our children deserve this chance." A chorus of voices rose, a mixture of approval and hope. Ilara felt a wave of relief and a powerful sense of purpose. She had overcome fear, she had sown hope. The path would be long, but the seed was planted. The treasure which had saved her from darkness now began to illuminate the future of many. The real work was just beginning. The next morning, the village vibrated with a new kind of energy. The skepticism of the previous day had given way to a palpable sense of hope. Families, including Marta and her children, who had previously doubted, now gathered in the square, their faces illuminated by the promise of a better future. Ilara, her heart still vibrating from the previous night, felt renewed strength. Isolde, observing from her porch, smiled with approval. The abandoned barn, once a skeleton of wood and stone, became the epicenter of a transformation. Men and women, young and old, united in a dance of labor and hope. Ilara, surprising herself, took on leadership with a naturalness she never imagined possessing. She distributed tasks, listened to suggestions, and, when necessary, used the treasure's coins to buy wood, tiles, and tools, always with the discretion Isolde had taught. Every hammer blow, every plank fixed, was a step towards the dream. Lyra, Teo, and Maya, wide-eyed, watched the progress, helping to carry small pieces of wood and feeling part of something grand. The joy on their faces was Ilara's greatest fuel. The biggest concern now was finding a teacher. Isolde, with her network of contacts and wisdom, was the key. Days later, she introduced Ilara to a middle-aged man named Master Elias, an old scribe who, after the fall of a small neighboring duchy, had lost his position and lived modestly. His eyes, though tired, shone with a passion for knowledge. He accepted Ilara's proposal with a respectful nod, touched by the community's vision and the widow's determination. The inauguration of the School of Light, as it was affectionately named, was a day of celebration. The barn, now clean, illuminated and filled with small tables and an improvised blackboard, was packed with children and their parents. Ilara, standing beside Master Elias and Isolde, felt a wave of emotion. Her children, Lyra, Teo, and Maya, sat in the front row, their curious eyes fixed on the teacher. Marta, with a sincere smile, squeezed Ilara's hand. "You did the impossible, Ilara. I never imagined I'd see a day like this." Marta's words were a balm for Ilara's soul, an acknowledgement that her journey of pain and overcoming had indeed ignited a light. She looked at Isolde, who returned a look of deep pride. "You didn't just honor the Order's legacy, Ilara," Isolde whispered. "You reinvented it. The true treasure wasn't the gold, but the heart that used it to transform lives." In the months that followed, the School of Light flourished. Children learned to read, write, and count, their laughter filling the air. Ilara, now a respected and beloved figure in the village, continued to oversee the project, her confidence growing daily. The fear and insecurity that had accompanied her for so long had been replaced by an unwavering purpose. She was no longer the abandoned widow. She was the matriarch of a new era, the guardian of hope, the builder of a future. The village, once marked by resignation, now pulsed with life and optimism. The school was just the beginning. Inspired by Ilara's example, the residents began to discuss other improvements. A small healing post, a community garden. The light Ilara had ignited in the monastery, guided by Isolde's wisdom and the strength of her love for her children, spread throughout the village, proving that true wealth lies in the ability to dream and build together. The future, once a fog of uncertainties, now shone with the promise of a better and fairer tomorrow for all. 2 years had passed since the inauguration of the School of Light, and the village, once a cluster of resigned houses, flourished with a vitality few would have imagined. The light Ilara had ignited in the monastery was not confined to the school walls. It had spread, warming every corner of the community. The small healing post, conceived after the school, now functioned fully, with Isolde supervising and teaching young apprentices the art of herbal healing. Pains and afflictions once ignored found relief, and the gratitude on the faces of the healed was a silent testament to the miracle Ilara had orchestrated. The community garden, another fruit of their unity, stretched out verdant, ensuring fresh food for everyone. Women like Marta, who once struggled to feed their children, now reaped the fruits of collective labor, their faces no longer marked by fatigue, but by a smile of satisfaction. Her children, once destined for a life of early toil, attended the School of Light, their notebooks filled with letters and numbers, their eyes shining with the future that was opening up. Ilara, now with more silver in her hair and a slower gait, but with an unwavering sparkle in her eyes, observed everything with a heart overflowing with fulfillment. She was no longer the abandoned widow, trembling with cold and fear. She was the matriarch, the visionary, the guardian of a hope that had become reality. Her house, once merely a refuge, was now a welcoming home, always open to anyone who needed advice or a hug. Lyra, Teo, and Maya had grown and flourished under the light of this new world. Lyra, with her keen intelligence, was Master Elias's best student, and already helped teach the younger children, dreaming of becoming a scribe. Teo, strong and gentle, dedicated himself to the community garden, learning the secrets of the earth and ensuring no one went hungry. He had expanded the garden, introducing new crops and techniques he had learned from travelers, enriching everyone's table. Maya, the youngest, with her artistic and cheerful spirit, was the soul of the school, always with a song on her lips and a drawing in her hands, spreading joy wherever she went. Her drawings adorned the walls of the school and houses, bringing color and life. They were living proof that education and care could transform destinies. On a sunny afternoon, Elara sat on Isolde's porch, herbal tea steaming between her aged hands. The village below them was a picture of life and harmony. Children ran, laughter echoed, and the melody of work and community filled the air. Isolde, with her wise gaze, squeezed Elara's hand. "You fulfilled the legacy, my dear, and you did it in a way the ancient order could never have imagined. You didn't just ignite the light, you made it a sun for everyone." Elara smiled, a silent tear tracing her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of deep gratitude and overflowing love. "I just wanted to protect my children, Isolde, and I found a purpose that went beyond myself." "And that is exactly how the greatest legacies are built," Isolde replied, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Not by the pursuit of glory, but by humble service and unconditional love. The treasure you found wasn't the gold, Elara. It was the courage in your heart, the compassion in your soul, and the unwavering faith in a better future." Elara looked at the village, at the school, at her children playing in the square. The monastery, once a place of despair, was now the symbol of a new beginning, of a redemption that manifested in every smile, in every child who learned, in every life that was cared for. She had arrived there, an abandoned widow, her heart in tatters, seeking only to survive. But instead of death, she had found life, and with it, the chance to build a future that was not only secure, but gloriously prosperous and full of hope. The light of redemption indeed had emerged where it was least expected, and Elara, the guardian of that light, knew that her true treasure was the community she had helped to flourish. Time, which once seemed a relentless enemy, had become a gentle ally. 5 more years had slipped by since the inauguration of the School of Light, and the village, now known as Village of Hope, was a beacon of prosperity and unity that shone for all. Elara, her hair almost white as snow and her hands wrinkled by time, but her eyes still shining with the same flame of purpose, often sat in the central square. From there, she observed the vibrant life she herself had helped to sow, a living testament to her resilience. Her children, now adults, were the pillars of this new era, each flourishing in their own way. Lyra, now a woman of rare wisdom, had become the village's principal scribe and teacher, teaching not only reading and writing, but also the history and values that Elara and Isolde had instilled with such zeal. Her students, among them Marta's children, and now even some of her own children, looked at her with admiration and respect. Teo, with his strength and kind heart, was the guardian of the community garden, a true master of the earth, ensuring that the granaries were always full and that no one went hungry. He had expanded the garden, introducing new crops and techniques he had learned from travelers, enriching everyone's table. Maya, the youngest, with her artistic and cheerful spirit, was the soul of the community, organizing festivals, plays, and storytelling, keeping alive the flame of joy and culture. Her drawings adorned the walls of the school and houses, bringing color and life. Isolde, though more fragile, continued to be the wise counselor, her presence a balm for all hearts. She and Elara shared long afternoons of tea, reminiscing about the past and dreaming of the future. "You see, Elara," Isolde would say, with a gentle smile and a profound gaze, "the true treasure wasn't the gold you found, but the heart you revealed. A heart capable of transforming darkness into light, hopelessness into a lasting and inspiring legacy. Ilara, in turn, felt a profound peace. The scars of abandonment and fear still existed, but they were now just distant memories, eclipsed by the vastness of love and gratitude that filled her soul. She had found her own redemption not in escaping misery, but in eradicating it for others. With every child's laughter in the school, every abundant harvest, every gesture of kindness between neighbors, Ilara saw the reflection of that forgotten strongbox. But, above all, she saw the unwavering strength of the human spirit and the promise of a better tomorrow. One day, at dusk, Ilara made the solitary journey to the old monastery. The ruins, once a place of terror and despair, now emanated an almost sacred serenity. The stone walls, covered in ivy, seemed to embrace the silence. She entered the chamber where she had found the treasure. The air was fresh and clean, and a ray of setting sun filtered through a crevice, illuminating the spot where the strongbox had been. There was no more gold there. What remained was an echo of her own journey, a silent and powerful reminder of where it all began. She touched the cold stone of the wall, feeling its rough texture under her aged fingers. It wasn't material wealth that mattered now, but the richness of purpose that discovery had unleashed in her life and in the lives of so many others. The monastery was no longer a symbol of abandonment, but of rebirth and hope. The lives of Ilara, her children, and the entire village were living proof that, even in the deepest ruins, the seed of hope could germinate and flourish, transforming desolation into a garden of infinite possibilities. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and felt the warmth of the sun on her face. A silent blessing, a testament that the light of redemption once ignited would never fade. Ilara's legacy, the widow who found more than gold, but a future for all, was etched not in stone, but in the hearts of every inhabitant of the Village of Hope.